Hi, everyone. Welcome in.
Good morning
Good
or
morning.
afternoon. Yeah, it's still morning. Close enough.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Kate. Hi, Nate. Hi, Jen's note taker.
A note taker that never talks back.
And expires after 30 minutes.
Yeah. Oh, geez. Now we play the waiting game, right?
Mm-hmm. We got Molly coming in.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Molly.
Molly.
So it looks like we're waiting for Chris, Lisa, Maureen, and Doug.
Right.
Nicole.
Yep.
Do we have quorum so we can get started and they can enter afterwards, or
Not
do we
yet.
need them to?
Well, we have four right
Oh,
now.
Chris is here. Chris is here.
Chris is here.
Mm.
We'll give it a couple minutes. I think we can. Hi, Chris. So we have just Maureen, everybody else, Maureen and Lisa, right?
Yeah, and Doug might join.
Yeah, Doug and I were just meeting not too long before now, so he knows that we're meeting. He might just be a minute late.
Okay. I think we ought to. I think we ought to be able to get started. Good afternoon. I'd like to call everybody to order this Belchertown Branding Committee meeting at 12:03 p.m. I'd like to ask for a roll call at this time.
Ed Knight here.
Kate Nato here.
Molly Robinson here.
Chris, you're here. I can't hear you. Yeah.
Chris Martin here.
Okay.
There we go.
And Nate Shattuck, we're here. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Um, our first meeting is our first point on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. I've been learned to understand there's been some changes or updates that need to happen and that we're not prepared to see them yet.
Well, so it was pointed out by Ed that I had abstaining on the for the roll call for the meeting minutes. I've changed that column to absent, so it that way it sort of reflects the same thing, that they didn't abstain, that Molly and Maureen were absent at that time. The other is, you're correct, I switched around the dates for what would be this meeting for deliberating next meeting time in section 7. So I now have that corrected to say that the next meeting as of last meeting would be today, May 7th. And then I've added in a line that there will be another meeting scheduled for Wednesday, May 14th, 2025 at 12 p.m. via Zoom, as well as the special meeting scheduled for May 19th. So those corrections have been made.
So should we wait till everybody actually has an opportunity to see them and then vote next time?
It's up to you.
I think that's probably the best thing we can do right now. So we'll just wait.
Okay.
Wait till we can do that and then move on it the next time. Okay.
All right. I'll send those out again.
Yeah. All right. That'll work. That way it's just everybody gets a chance to see it and off we go. Okay. So we're going to move on to the project updates. Granting committee. Danielle, floor is yours.
Sure. Hi, everyone. We are very excited to have Katie with us here again to share the 3 preliminary brands with us all. So the way our conversation, Katie will guide us through the conversation, but just to give you all a little bit of direction for the conversation, Katie is going to share those 3 preliminary brands that we shared with you last night, give some of the logic and the rationale for the decisions, reference where in the research, where in the conversations, her decisions emerged for the 3 brands. Our goal today is to decide on 2 potential pathways that feel good and exciting for her to continue to work with, and come back next week and revisit the conversation on those 2 final options. So there's still room for editing, there's still room for discussion, but our goal is to narrow it down to 2. And with that, I'll pass it over to Katie.
Hello, everyone. I want to do an announcement first. I have a sinus infection and double ear infection. So if you catch me just coughing off to the side or turning my mic off, that's what I'm doing. Just in case. And my eyes started twitching. So if you see that, just, yeah, it's a time over here. But I'm going to share my screen. Can you hear me okay? I know my voice is rough. Okay. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the exact same thing we said last night. I'm going to quickly walk through everything. I think a lot of the explanation was within the document itself. I'll quickly walk through it so that we have ample time for discussion. That's kind of the key point today. So this is option 1. And this one definitely stemmed from partially our last discussion about making sure that we keep things open and have a lot of flow to them, pulling in each of those different pieces of Belchertown itself. So agriculture, nature, the Quabbin, or any other kind of water source. You'll see that kind of goes back and forth. People can interpret how they wish. And the library itself. A lot was pulled from that for this specific logo. The font as well, kind of meant to be more flowy, a little bit more playful and fun is what I would call this one compared to the other options. I went ahead and kind of pulled out the keywords from the survey findings for each of these options. So you can see below where they were kind of highlighted as key features potentially for the brand. The colors for this one specifically were pulled from the library steeple, if that's what you want to call it. I did tweak them slightly so that they would be accessibility or meet the accessibility standards. So, if they're used on white versus on other colors, things like that. Something I do want to point out is the steeple itself. I believe it's like a wind or weather reader at the very top. That's been kind of brought up between Danielle and I about, do we show that? Does it look too much like a church? Do we potentially acknowledge that portion. So that's something that we've been thinking about as well. I'll also add, just on my own kind of refinement for next steps with this one, kind of looking at my designer people in the group that I'm sure notice some of the line weights are not all the same, specifically like in the gaps between, the water and the agriculture part. So that kind of stuff would be cleaned up. The fonts are both freely available. All fonts are freely available with all of the options. I think throughout all of these, I kind of was running into a question for the group of the sub brand or other layouts. Belchertown itself, of course, is a very long name. And we had kind of talked back and forth on we like a B, we don't like a B. So I didn't want to focus too much on just the B being a potentially vertical option. So I think there's the most room for improvement or refinement in these secondary layouts for all the logos across the board. I kind of like to do a general brand board, just bringing in some imagery and colors so you can get kind of a sense and feel of possibilities. And then a couple mock-ups of what that could look like throughout town, or, as letterhead on t-shirts, things like that. So that's option 1. Option 2. So this one definitely leans more, I apologize for my speech. I can barely hear myself. Leans into the nature side of Belchertown a bit more than the others. Again, we have kind of the Quabbin or water source represented, trees, forests, just general recreation, agriculture, the wide open fields, and then wildlife, which was kind of picked up here and there in the survey finding as well. And then the shape of the actual logo kind of calls back to the carriage wheels and the archways you see a lot at the library itself. Again, all of these colors are pulled from general imagery and tweaked to fit accessibility standards. Fonts, all accessible and free to get and to use. This one I think has a bit more variety and options as far as secondary logos and things that you can kind of pull out from it. I think it's a bit more versatile than the first one, just with it having as many actual design pieces within the one logo. Another just kind of general mood board. And then lastly, the mock-ups. All right, and then the final one, option 3. So this one I kind of wanted to lean more into the agricultural portion, as well as that big wide open spaces, and a little bit of that in between. I kind of was reviewing all of the responses again, and we kept hearing that Belchertown was kind of, in between Amherst and Boston, or kind of your destination in between those places. And I thought that this kind of leaned that way. Again, it can be interpreted to have the rivers and the lakes, or the fields and the crops, whatever you might see fit. I think it leaves a lot for interpretation, but leans a bit more agricultural. And then especially with the color scheme as well, these colors could be pulled from a variety of things, but I thought it was kind of cool to bring in the red here, that I saw a lot around town, not only on buildings like homes and the museum, but also within the library stained glass itself. There was a lot of deep reds and burgundies. Same thing here with the fonts. I think this one you can move things around a bit more because it's probably the most simple of the 3. But again, it's kind of, do we want to play with that B? Do we want one specific secondary image itself? Do we want that to be a B? I think, like I said, that's still open for conversation. A little bit of a mood board and some mock-ups. And that's what I've got. And I will hand it off so you can stop hearing my sick voice. and open it up for discussion. Danielle, I'll let you kind of lead
Yeah,
that portion.
sure. I think just by way of starting, maybe we can unshare screen and just be in conversation with one another and then share if there are things that we specifically want to look at. Curious if we can go around the room and just hear immediate first impressions for which one or two resonates the most, or which elements resonate the most from each of the committee members.
I'd be happy to start if that's okay.
Sure.
We've so the three options, there was some discussion last week about the use of the church steeple and everything, and it being discussed as controversial. And part of that the first option that you presented, of course, it has the steeple of the library. So that opens up the conversation for any steeple at all. If there is any steeple that should be represented, it should be the one on the, with the clock on it, in my opinion. And of course, there's a water tower right behind it too. So that's kind of, a lot of people look at that in the center of town as well. I feel like the font in that, in that first option is really good. The second option, I think, it's very basic. It has more options, like you say. Just seems a little simple to me. It kind of, if there was a little bit more dynamic to it, then we could work on that. And number 3 is a hard no.
I can jump in next if that's okay. I will be honest. I did not like any of these. Like none of these. I was like, yay! I want to get behind this. This is something that I can stand behind and work on rallying troops around and everything else. Like obviously, whatever we come up with, I know that's mine to do. But I definitely wasn't thrilled with any of these. The first one, my first thought was it was a church. And then once I started looking at it more, I realized it was the steeple for the club library. And we're not going to have people around to breaking down these logos, so they have to be like immediately recognizable to somebody what they are. And if somebody has to tell me that it's the library and not a church, I see that as a problem. Also, Amherst, Massachusetts, who is right next to us, like their website and all their social media screams their town hall, which has very similar architecture to this, and I think it's too confusing. It doesn't really provide anything Belchertown, if you will, to it. It seems very generic, like water, land, church, building thing. The second one, it's okay. It's probably the one I hate the least out of all of them. But I see those wedges like pizza slices. And maybe I've lived in town for too long, but everybody always complains we have too many pizza joints in town. So the first thing I think is, hey, we're showing off all the wheel. So while a carriage wheel idea is awesome, maybe this needs to be expanded to be more like a carriage wheel and less like half a pizza pie or something like that. I also find that the details within the slices are too hard to see. And you get the colors more before you actually see like the water and stuff like that. Generally speaking, between 1 and 2, I feel like the water feels more ocean to me, like a lot of movement, and not necessarily like the quadrant, if that makes sense. And then 3 was absolutely out. There was just the windmill. Really, that's what it looks like to me is a funky windmill, and we certainly don't have any of those in town. And so while they may be useful, I don't necessarily see that one really going forward. So that's my gut feedback.
Thanks, Kate. Anyone else want to share their thoughts?
Right.
Yeah. Nope. Go ahead, Molly.
Are you sure? Okay, I'll go. Um, this is awesome. Like these are just really distinctive options, which I really appreciate, and like the thoughtfulness of taking the community input and using inspiration from real imagery, I think is just really, really thoughtful. So thank you for this work. The first one I think is the closest for me. Oh, my computer's doing something. Um, ugh, sorry, it's like trying to open Excel for no reason. Ugh. Um, yeah. The first one is definitely the closest for me. I also thought that the steeple was too church-like. I just, especially for out-of-towners or new businesses interested in coming here, we don't want their first impression to be that this is a church. So I don't know if there's a different landmark or way to represent that, because I do feel like having that element kind of anchoring it at the end is working really well, and the colors really, really nice. So yeah, I don't know what the other options are here. The font works really well with this, with the logo together. It's rather playful, like you said. I'm curious if this is something we would be saying, like, this is our H1 font on the website, and how we would all feel about that. Like, it's very distinctive. Um, so just something to consider. It definitely works well with the flowy nature of the logo, though. And I like how flexible this one is to orient it in different ways, and to use the B without having to add like a decoration to it. It's sort of like surrounded by the elements versus built into them, if that makes sense. Um, there's some options where the word Belchertown is split into two lines, and I feel like that's not okay to do. I don't know. Others think, but I don't know if we want to go there. The second one I like a lot. It's very clean and simple. It's definitely leaning more like recreational and outdoors. I would love to, I don't know if there's another color way to add here, or a different element to highlight. And like my concern is that maybe it's too abstract. Like, will people immediately know what we're trying to reflect here? Like, is there a crisper way to do this where we can add more detail? I'm not sure. And similar to Kate, the wave is too ocean for where we are. And then the last one, yeah, I don't love this one very much. I think the windmill doesn't feel true to Belchertown. I mean, I would like it maybe without the windmill, actually. But it's not as flexible. There's not so much we can do with it. But overall, this is exciting to see.
Right,
Chris?
yeah, I'll jump in with mine. Not too much different from everybody else's reviews so far. I definitely, I don't see the library in the first one. I think that the steeple on top is just far too church-like, and again, like, I think we should avoid any religious icons. It causes issues. It's going to drive away certain businesses and stuff. I think we should try to avoid anything that kind of looks like that in the designs. A suggestion I have is maybe the lower part of the library, where it's a little more flat, it's a little more wide. You can still have some of the circular elements in there. I don't know, just to see what that looks like. It does kind of throw off some of the aspects of the design where we're trying to merge everything around the B. Although design one, like, I thought was really sharp. I love the colors in it, the contrast in it. The kind of flowing letters of the actual word Belchertown are a little awkward. It's almost too whimsy, but I also like, I feel like it could grow on me. It's not too bad, and it definitely stands out. Um, the second design, it's growing on me. The different aspects of it, thinking of it as the wagon wheel, thinking of it, we've seen this, the design of the clap library. I think it works in a way. Another idea I had for it even was to try to do it like a full circle, because there's a lot of crossroads in Belchertown as well. So, it could represent the spokes, it could represent an intersection, like we've said, Belchertown is very like pass through neighborhood. Maybe we just lean into that and say like we're an intersection of all these different highways and stuff. Um, again, reflecting the wave just kind of looks like we don't have waves here. We do have water. So I don't know if like the icons should, we should see some different options with the icons in there. But like I said, it's growing on me the more I look at it, which I think is okay. We do want some of the sort of like pop, like recognition, but I don't think it's too far off. And then the last design, as everybody else is harping on, I will too, that the windmill just doesn't, I just don't think it hits the mark on Belchertown. I do really like sort of the way that you did the dip in the water and then the upwards of like the hill with that flowing there. I think if we were to just remove the windmill, it would be too empty. And I think that a lot of people would probably complain that we put all this time into a new logo and it ended up just being like two lines next to each other. So I feel like maybe we should try to put some more elements in there. I don't know if we try to sort of work in that same like library feel or like a tractor or something on the side. I know we've had conversations in the past about like, okay, but if we do a tractor, what kind, what style, and that could throw things off. I just feel like there's like that's probably the least liked on mine as well. So if we're narrowing it down, I'd say just pull that one and not worry about putting too much into it. But it definitely yeah, I feel like it just needs more. So yeah, I think that's where I'm coming out with it.
This has all been great and exactly what we want at this stage, just to pop in. So, and maybe before anyone else continues or adds, I'm looking at the chat. Yeah, so something I did play around with a lot with the library was those three windows in the front. I couldn't get them to work just right, but I think that's something to revisit for sure. And then I think is that the what do you call it? The outfall or something with the quabbin outfall? Yeah, and again we have that arch there, so okay, I'm gonna
That's the spillway.
spillway. Okay.
Spillway bridge.
And that's actually in where?
Is it? Oh, well, okay. And then there's the Quabbin Tower too. But everybody talks about Quabbin, so in the community it resonates. So
Right. Okay, I'll let anyone else check.
Okay. My take on all this. To me, the staple on the library does not symbolize Belchertown. That's certainly not something when I think of Belchertown, that's not what I'm thinking about. I like the idea, but not with the library. Going down, um, to go along with, I think Molly, the pie slices, and that's when I see that, I see pie slices. I don't see a wagon wheel. If we had something that looked more like a wagon wheel, then maybe, but I don't see a wagon wheel there. I see pie slices, pizza, whatever. And some of the symbols used in there would, again, doesn't jump out at me as representing Belchertown. Oh, and I do agree that Belchertown needs to be on one line. Splitting up into two lines just doesn't work. I like the colors in the third one. That looks too much like a windmill, as others have said. Maybe something could be worked out with a big B. I don't know. But that's right now. I mean, I don't know what symbol, if no one is willing to use a staple, I don't know what symbol out there jumps out at me as representing Belchertown. To me, the identity of the town is in that clock tower, in that staple. But if that's completely off the table, I don't know what's going to do it.
How about the barn at Cold Spring Orchard?
At
Yeah.
Hannafin's? No, not really.
I shared a picture in the chat.
Oh, I'm not even looking at the chat. I got to pull it up.
We have a handful of iconic barns in town. Yeah.
Yeah, but but they're barns. They're not,
Except that one's
I mean,
located
none
at
of
the
them.
Cold Spring. Ironically.
Yeah, although, yeah, I do see that. That is at the Cold Spring, but I mean, I can't enlarge it. Oh, I have to download it. There we go.
I mean, when I first was looking for homes around Belchertown and I was driving around in this area, it was definitely the big yellow barn, the big red barn, that they all stuck out to me as different landmarks that, driving around town, I'd see those, be like, oh, okay, I know the area we're in.
Yeah. I think my question, and something I ran into as well, was, do we don't want to highlight a certain barn, right? And give preference to a certain company potentially, or wherever that might fall in the big scheme of things. So we'd have to kind of keep it generic. That would be my initial thought. And then second, I do like what we came back to, Ed saying like the clock again. And I do kind of continuously see, clock, carriage wheel, arches.
Sorry, is Katie breaking up for everybody else or just me?
I think it's just you.
Yeah,
Just,
Okay,
yeah.
I'm gonna leave and jump back in again, okay?
Anyway, quickly, that was just something I've kind of seen come together as, don't make it pizza slices, but maybe there's something we can bring in, that imagery of all of those things.
Nicole, Jen, Maud, do any of you have any thoughts thinking broadly about your constituents, whether it's like the business stakeholders, creative economy community, and residents? Any other thoughts?
Yeah, so my thoughts were definitely in line with most everyone else. One thing I was thinking on the first one, so the first one is my favorite of the three. I like the colors. I'm wondering if the O in Belchertown, if we could, maybe that could become a carriage wagon wheel, maybe, possibly. But I'm trying to also think of what that building could be. And I was hoping that it was going to be the library windows. And if that's not something that you're going to be able to do, I think that we should probably pivot to a completely different structure, whether it's, the gazebo up on the common, or a generic barn, the stone house, any one of those things. My concern with the second one is people are going to say, and Katie, this is nothing to you, but people are going to look at that and say, I could have done that. That's clip art. And that really worries me because I feel like we're kind of under the microscope with our committee. So I think we want to be careful about that. And then for me, yeah, the third one was just completely out. I actually didn't like when I saw that windmill, I thought it was like one of those windmills like at the Cape. Like the energy windmills. I had no recognition on that. So for me, that one is probably out. But those are my thoughts. And that's where I think what you're going to hear from the community.
Thanks, Nicole. Maud, Jen, Doug, any other thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of echoes in here. Like I, I think thinking along similar lines. The first one definitely was one of those. Like the colors are really strong. I think you get the like the hills and fields and sense of place and the water. I agree with what a lot of people are saying about the library. I definitely saw a cross, and I did not recognize it as the clap library. So I think another structure, and there have been some really great suggestions on that. I really like what you were saying, Nicole, on some of those suggestions. Um, I also the type. I see how the font is really integral to this, and I have a similar like Molly was saying, it feels a little more playful. I like the font in the second one better, but I don't know if it would actually work in this design. But that was just, I don't know, something I was thinking. And then I like the secondary designs, especially those on the right side. I think if the structure changes, I like the balance, I think, is that they would fit in a square really nicely. I thought that was really great. And it seemed adaptable to a lot of uses. The second one, again, I liked the font. I liked that it was like there. I like the colors. I definitely think it's very much in this like nature direction. The illustration, it looked to me like a fan, like the placement felt really awkward on the off to the side in that way. And I actually really preferred for the main one that was more like in the secondary logos on the top left, where it was like Massachusetts was brought to the left and the half circle was on the right above. Um, and I agree with, again, what a lot of people have been saying about like the icons being a little like wispy or not specific enough. I think they could be both more specific and sharper, um, and cleaner there. I love the idea that Chris was putting forward of like that the full wagon wheel feels also like a wheel and like a crossroads, so it captures a lot of things at once. I think that that's really strong. And agree that like a little less on this just like nature and the colors would make it feel maybe a little bit more dynamic. And similarly, the third one, I didn't feel like a strong sense of place.
So, some follow-up questions and things that I'm hearing that I'm wondering if we can just narrow in a little bit deeper into conversation on. For option two, I noticed that there's quite a lot of pictorial work in like the doodle feel, the drawing feel, the hand-drawn feel. That was some feedback that folks kind of that was an element that folks requested last time. Is that something that you, as Katie iterates, would like to see more of that? And Katie, is that a useful question to ask?
Yeah, that was kind of going to be one of my questions because we were leaning towards that kind of rough historic feel, which was where I kind of brought that in. But I feel like everyone's leaning more clean lines. Um, and maybe we could bring it in different ways, but not that kind of sketched out feeling.
I agree with that.
Katie, can you share your screen again?
Yes.
I've added
And
a couple more pictures in the chat too, just for conversation's sake.
and what I'm hearing in terms of consensus is that we would really like to hone in on options one and two. And the elements that we like from option three are the colors and the way that the um landscape and the seascape interact with one another. So there could be ways to maybe pull the way the landscape and seascape interact into option one or I mean option two rather. And we like the colors. Well, I'm seeing that Jen says the colors might be too close to Amherst. But maybe we like the colors and we like the land and seascape, but otherwise there's not really much from here that we want to take. We're good with leaving three behind, right? Okay, so on that note, maybe we can just look at option two and even zoom in a little bit on that sort of like hand drawn, really pictorial elements that are in the circles. And and Katie, please, any specific questions you have on that?
I mean, I think I would say we're leaning away from this. I think anything to take from it is like maybe some of the nature colors, the carriage wheel archway vibe, but not the pizza slices, and potentially the font we keep. I would say those would be the only things I've heard. It kind of sounds like we want more options of option one. Kind of more refinements and maybe a couple. I'm kind of seeing it as now I take option one and make 2 new versions of it with what I've heard. And by that, I mean not just tweaking colors or changing the steeple, but coming at it fresh, potentially a new font, really creating 2 that stem from it, but are not the same. Is that
Is there
correct?
anybody that likes the font in number 1? Because I do see that it's whimsical, but I love how it fits in like little puzzle pieces with the water and the fields above it. Like, I think that brings something really unique to this logo. Are we that against the font here?
I happen to like it.
I can
I
clarify.
like it too.
I'm not against it. I'm just it was a question for me
Yeah,
whether or not it was too playful.
that's where I'm at too. Like it works perfectly with this design. Take it out of the design and put it somewhere else just by itself. And is that the
Yeah.
font that you want to see all the time?
And
Yeah.
Molly, maybe that means we need to if we kept this font as the logo font, that this is used for very specific uses only. And then there's, 2 other fonts that would be, like you said, like the H1 on the website. Because no, you wouldn't want to see this everywhere.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing is we like the way in which the letters that spell out the town are embedded in the landscape and the seascape of the logo, right? So that is something that can be replicated with different fonts and different architectural elements that are embedded into the logo.
Yeah.
So whether it's this font or like a font that's I mean, I don't know exactly how well that would work with like a serif font, but we're liking the way that the letters and the word are creating sort of like a foreground to an image that is the logo.
Our school colors are black and orange as well. So I think that's got to resonate somewhere, somehow.
That's a good point. And, I did take all the colors from the library itself. So while we are probably mixing, unless I can work with the windows potentially, there's still that library essence in the logo if that gets taken off completely.
Question. I'm thinking about Doug's comment in the chat. Like, I wonder if it would look less like a church steeple if there was like more houses or like historic structures like on top of the land and the sea. Like, because whenever they do like the aerials of the common, that's like what you see. I don't know if even that's possible. I don't know. Whatever.
I shared a picture of the water tower in the old town hall.
Yeah, like, yeah, like, because
It's
it's
kind of
always
like
like a bunch of landmarks. And if I don't want to overload a logo with
there's a
plot.
gazebo with a clock in the background,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. So it's
Are folks clear and comfortable with Katie moving in this direction where we're kind of actually eliminating options 2 and 3 and really building out 2 separate options for one where we're having the name of the town, some landscape, some seascape, and some architecture built around it? Does that feel really good before we like abandon option 2?
And
Well,
I don't hate option two, right? Like I said, it's sort of growing on me, and I think it just needs a little rework. But if I'm the only one that's calling that out and saying it's all right, then I'm willing to let that slide.
Yeah, I like it too.
And, maybe what you're liking from it is something we can pull in here. I kind of said these secondary logos I didn't get kind of a full feel yet for, but maybe if that icon that we create feels clean and simple, kind of like number 2 does, would that, you think, kind of address what you're feeling, Chris and Jen? Maybe not.
Maybe.
I
I
think
mean,
that work. And it seems important that we, if you're going to iterate on this version, that the two options that we have are still quite distinctive, so that when we're asking people to vote, it's not like, they have two real options. So I trust that you're going to take this as inspiration to evolve and maybe a little piece of two.
Yep.
Can you pull 2 back up again? And is it possible to see like that page of 1 side by side with 2?
Yes. Let me set that up really fast.
Thank you.
One second. Okay, can you see this?
Yep.
Yeah, I think number 2 needs more for sure. Like it's just. Take elements of both of them, put them together.
I guess my kind of main question, and maybe this is what kind of delves into the two options we create, but it's sounding like if we have a structure, it will be the gazebo, potentially, the water tower, potentially, the old town hall, and then potentially some kind of archway, window, carriage wheel, clock thing. Are those all good choices? I know we had talked about barns as well.
I mean, the barn idea from the Cold Spring Farm, I mean, obviously that's grassroots, the actual place of the Cold Spring in town. It is owned by the University of Massachusetts, so it's not exactly, I don't think you're looking at a sole proprietor there as far as that's concerned. I have seen it used in places where it's been emblematical of the town. So as far as that's concerned, I think if it works, then throw it out there.
Yeah.
I really like in the top design the orange. I feel like that extra pop of color is really necessary to bring it alive. Like when I look at those 2 stacked on top of each other, like that's automatically where my eye goes. And then my secondary thought to that is I like the balance of the structural element to the logo on the right hand side versus around the B in Belchertown.
And then kind of with that Massachusetts being on the left, I think that adds.
Yeah, yep.
I mean, do we even need the Massachusetts in there?
I'll probably make it an option with and without for you guys just to have, to be honest. And then you can.
Because if it makes it less busy and more focused on the actual town, then we're simplifying the nature as we go, Just a thought. I mean, see, that changes it completely. And if somebody's wearing it on a shirt,
Put those on the desktop quick.
you know, if there's somebody's wearing it on a shirt, or there's you know what I mean, there's flexibility. I don't know.
Yeah. But we're the only Belchertown in world.
Yeah. Right. So no pressure. There's no pressure at all. You know.
Yeah, we don't have
The
to
only
call it
one.
this. Yeah.
And so what are we going to say to everybody else that looks at this and says it's the only one?
Yeah.
How sweet it is.
Yeah.
And if people haven't heard of Belchertown before, it is also really great to give them the context that it is located in Massachusetts and not New Hampshire or Connecticut or Vermont.
Sure.
So that's where like having both options in your toolkit is really useful. If you have stuff that's going out regionally for tourism, it's really helpful to have both options there. Locally, you don't need the Massachusetts, but if you're trying to get Vermonters to come down, they might want that context.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's an open discussion.
What would the second logo look like if we, instead of putting the wheel in the top right or top left rather, if we like centered it over everything, like blew it up, made it a big arch,
like a sunrise?
I have that kind of down here. Oh,
right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you do have it there. It definitely looks big, but like I wonder even if we like do the same kind of like cutout around the lettering and everything, if that would make it look a little more interesting.
Like it kind of fell.
Right. The same way that the other one does.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, just like kicking out ideas. Because like that fits like the square shape we're looking at. Like it could be moved around to different ways. Different alignments. I do like, the single, and God, I'm going to call it a slice because that's the easiest way to put it, but it does call back to the pizza, but like, that is nice that you could do like that one slice and be like Parks and Recreation, right? Like you can do conservation could be another one and stuff like that. Like it is versatile. And I like that about it.
To me, it looks like a megaphone with a slice. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's nothing iconic about that, as far as just a single slice,
Yeah.
I like the one at the top right where it's the tree, and I feel like the tree and the wave are the most easy to identify, and then you can take it out of the slice and use it on its own, but I don't think we'd have the same effect with the bird or the fields.
Oh, see, until you pointed that out, I didn't even see that.
Yeah, I think it's a good train of thought, and I agree with Molly about the tree there. But we have so many different departments that we have to have sub logos for that we're not going to have like an element in these 4 or 6 or 8 slices that are going to work for all of those different departments.
That's a good
Okay. Yeah, we probably don't want to get into like tons of sub logos to manage.
Yeah. But I think, Chris and everyone has noted that the versatility of this one is important. It's not the right kind. We don't want pizza involved, but we can definitely keep that in mind when we're creating all the different whatever pieces of this one are involved,
Would it be too wild if we did just say that that's like the base design, but if the police department wants to put an icon that's a little different but stays the same style in theirs, they could do it and just change it up. I mean, like Amesbury, again, like that's the one that we're basing a lot of this off of. Like they allowed that to like every department there, that they said go ahead, change the colors, use an element of the logo, but like the town logo is the same and each department can just do something based off of that in a very similar manner.
I think we open the doors to a lot of misinterpretation and misuse of what that means, just based on how things have been like entered into the website. Like we gave people a little bit of leeway there, and things have kind of have gone sideways with adding, you know, colors and fonts and italics and underlines and stuff like that. I feel like if we give them any leeway to change it, then it's just going to be opening the door for that.
But maybe in the, when we get to that point, I'm not saying this is what it would be, but if this is in a circle and the police department wants it blue and the fire department wants it orange, like whatever those slight variations might be, maybe that's the most we do in that kind of a way.
And usually I would think that what could actually happen is that in the area where it says Massachusetts underneath Belchertown, and in this logo, for example, it would say fire, police, recreation. Is that where you imagine it, Katie?
Yeah, I can't say for sure. I think there's possibility to do something like, sorry, you're all seeing me in this document.
Typically, each department has their own license or has had their own license for a long time to make their own.
Even like something like this, whatever we end up, so like Belchertown, and then this would say police, but we still have that icon here. But it could also be what you just said, Danielle, where it's this full landscape.
Looks like a spaceship by itself.
Yeah, right.
So we only have a couple minutes left. Katie, I am not clear if this committee has decided that Katie is moving full steam ahead with revisions on options 1 and 2, or we're taking option 1 as our base and incorporating the elements that we like from option 2 and getting 2 new iterations of option 1. Are you clear on that, Katie? Is there still conversation?
The latter, what you just said, but anybody correct me if I'm wrong.
If I had to vote today, I couldn't vote for either one, really, just because we're not there yet, I don't think.
Yep.
Right. So our question is, so by next week, we want to have 2 versions that with minimal iteration could go forth to the public for voting. 2 distinct options. Do we want those 2 distinct options to follow the path of option 1, where there are 2 versions of option 1 that are quite distinct, but similar in format style because that's the one that seems to be resonating with most people? Or do we want a version of option 1 and a new version of option 2 to put forth to the public for both, so that Katie has direction for the next week on where to take these?
So actually, can I ask that of Katie? Will we be able to stay on timeline if we did look at 2 next time around?
Yeah, I think no matter what, my plan is to get you these next options like ASAP. And then maybe Danielle in the interim before our meeting next week, you all can send her any feedback and I can take one more look at them before we meet to decide on Wednesday. I kind of want as many drafts and possibilities shown to you as I can, since we are on a tight timeline. But that's my plan, if that works.
And my assumption is that we would get more options if we stuck with the consensus around option 1 and 2 distinct versions of option 1. So option 1A and B, knowing that those would be very distinct, but in this general similar style. Am I articulating that correctly, Katie?
Yeah, I think that's kind of my plan. And with that said, it's not going to be, what we see today, but instead of the steeple, it's a gazebo and everything stays the same. It'll be 2 new fresh ones that, come from today's comments. And obviously keeping the things that we do like.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
I just don't know, if you have two options that are so similar, whether the general public is actually going to feel like they had a choice, if that makes sense. Not to play devil's advocate, but if they look both the same
Right.
fundamentally,
I'll make sure that they're
know,
different.
I mean-
We don't want, like I said, we don't want the same one that we see today and then another one with a different building and different colors. There'll be two different ideas, but within that same vibe.
yeah.
Great. Katie, is there anything else that you need questions from this committee?
Are
for
you
the
going to be able to
draft
see the
version?
photos on the chat? I mean, I added a bunch of photos there.
Yep, I've downloaded all of the photos.
Okay.
Sorry, guys. In the meantime, if you all have any more photos of the gazebo and the water tower, just so I can see some more angles. I haven't been able to find great photos myself online. Just in case I do use one or both of those, that would be awesome. But I did download everything.
So instead of your gazebo, why don't you include like the photo, the colorized photo that it's not actually a photo, I think it's a drawing. The one with the flagpole, the soldiers monument, the cannon, and the gazebo together. I think to me that speaks a lot more to Belchertown than just the gazebo or just the water tank.
And I think that's something I'm going to play with is, even Doug and Jen were talking about homes and having more of like a town feel than a focus on one specific landmark. And so I agree with what you're saying. It might be a combination of all those things. The one thing I would potentially lean away from with the statue is that's going to be very hard to make look like what it truly is, especially when it gets made very small. But I agree with, why not include multiple if we can? So I'm not disagreeing at all with that.
Okay. So thank you, Katie, for all of your amazing work on this impossible timeline up to this point. Thank you, everyone, for your feedback. We will get another round out to you quickly and hopefully be able to share that feedback right back with Katie so that there's already some revisions worked in. Also know that Katie and I are in conversation pretty much daily at this point. So, really appreciate everything that you're doing that's not necessarily visible, Katie. And we're constantly referencing that research document and the conversations that everyone has had. So want to acknowledge that and say thank you. I also wanted to give a couple of minutes of space to this group if we needed to discuss what the voting process looks like. I know that Kate and Chris had been in conversation around this. We're expecting to put these online for a vote from the 15th to the 18th, which gives us 1 day turnaround from next week's meeting. Any thoughts, questions, things that you absolutely need to make sure that all of this can go live when it needs to?
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in, I guess, with two things. The first is actually still a tail end of the last one that I think that if definitely if like logo ideas, rough drafts, stuff like that came in before the next meeting, like I think it would be fine for us, especially with the deadline, to send back responses directly to Danielle with like, yes, no's, whatever on those things, as long as we're not as a team deliberating. That way, like if there's, I know we mentioned like 4 or 5 different buildings that could be in there, like that way we could start narrowing it down, and then at the meeting it'll be like, okay, here are the final few that like we liked. I would like to propose that idea and see if that flies with everybody. As far as the voting goes, it's a simple form that I would create for the website. I would just have the 2 images, side by side or one above the other or whatever, and just a simple like, what is, which one do you choose, A or B? Um, we could go further if people want to say like, what do you like about it? What don't you like about it? We can make this anonymous, or we can actually request people submit their names and whether they're a member of the town or business or whatever else. Actually, that's not a terrible idea to find out if they're a resident or they work here, or they're just somebody who's interested in Belchertown or logo design. That's all super simple to set up with those forms and things. So voting should be really easy online. I think it'll be tougher to do the physical copies and getting them around.
I do have a question about the online voting. Do you know, Chris, if our website allows it so we can limit it to people only voting once?
If we require them to sign in. But I don't think that's or we require them to provide an email address and state that it's not that we're collecting that for any reason other than to verify that people have only voted once.
Yeah, I think it's going to be important to make sure people are only voting once. But I'm not sure if people are going to want to give us their email addresses, even if we say we're not going to use it for anything else.
Or we ask for their town address. Name
and address, sure. What about if we use the third-party voting tool, could we embed it in the website? Because I know like a lot of third-party voting tools have that like automatically built in where they can pick up someone's ISP or something like that to ensure they're only voting once.
Well, the only problem with that is that if somebody, that's not foolproof either, right? Because then you're limiting to one vote per household, or somebody can vote from one location with their phone and then another location with their phone later, and then another location.
That's true.
Like, that doesn't entirely solve the problem. Direct identifying information about them is probably the best. But even then, like, what's to stop somebody from like what's me from going in saying that I'm Nate Shattuck, putting in his address and voting for him and then knocking out his vote, so that's tough too. So I think it would have to be, if we really wanted to enforce it, we'd have to go with a website sign in.
So
That's going to limit your responses.
I sort of wonder if if anyone is going to be scheming in that way to get more votes in, and if they are, then like doesn't that sort of speak to like real passion behind one of the design options? Like that would have to take like real passion and fervor for one of these design options to say, okay, I'm gonna like go in and become Nate and become Nicole and become Chris and vote on other people's behalf.
Well, we've had histories in town where like like the rec department put out like a poll, like what should we do with this space, and the pickleball enthusiasts were able to like get a coalition behind that and really push the vote that direction.
I wonder if it's
not unheard of here.
Well, is that people like being nefarious, or were they just rallying people to vote?
Yeah, but it's not a true representation when you get one group that really leans on something. It doesn't necessarily reflect the overall feelings of the town. It's just you have one localized group that decided to.
Yeah, so we're going to face that no matter what. If we're launching a poll, the people who take
probably
will be the.
And maybe
if a logo would inspire that, then to me, like that's the really clear winning logo. If a logo would inspire someone to start a group chat and say, we're gonna like, somehow find a way to rig the system and have so many votes that we're getting the thing. And I know I'm making light of it, and I really do believe it should be like one vote per person and that every voice does matter in this process. But like, I think that if we have a logo that is inspiring that, then that is like beyond I think, Katie, beyond a designer's wildest dreams that someone would try to like hack a voting system to really push a design forward.
Well, my main thought, just with engagement experience, I wonder if, you don't call it or act like it's a complete vote, and instead just you're gathering feedback, because technically, right, even if it's, 2% off of a winner, no matter what, it's this committee that decides. So it's not a true, like, is that truly what you all would put in front of the select board? I'm not sure we've even come to that consensus, but I wonder if just making it less of a quote vote.
I think that we really need to make it a vote, and a vote that's just to have a true mandate for the select board. And really, we're controlling what goes to vote. So we should all feel very confident with either option that gets presented publicly and be happy with either option. I think that's where we should be landing. And then I mean, what I understood from Nicole was that would be what the select board would be looking for, is like a mandate from the public based on a vote.
Okay.
But I think framing it as which do you prefer, your top choice will inform our recommendation to the select board is the language. Because I mean, I don't think this will happen, but there's a world in which it's a 50-50 split, right? And then what we haven't even discussed that. We'll cross that bridge if we must. But which do you prefer? I think if there's going to be any opportunity for feedback, maybe it's which do you prefer? Why did you make that choice? Not asking for feedback on either design, because we're not realistically going to be able to do a new design based on that feedback at that point. So in terms of feedback, I would limit it to which do you prefer and why do you prefer it, so that we're getting positive responses that will inform the recommendation, right? So it's what this committee would vote on, and then we would use the language from this poll to share with the select board and say people liked this one because it did XYZ.
I think the due diligence has to be done in the process as well, because if the select board is looking for the mandate, that what the feedback was, and one person has the ability to skew that result by 10%, it makes it hard to justify that the choice is actually legitimate. Just my thought. I mean, it's not, I don't know. And to Maud's point, I mean, she said that the select board is going to go forth with whatever the general public says. But if 10 people have the same ability to affect 25 votes apiece, well, that changes, the voice for everybody.
Well, we also talked about having, an in-person station at the library and at the senior center, right? So we're operating on the honor system that, like, no one is going to stuff, 5 votes into a box, right?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you're right there.
And I trust that, like, the librarians and the folks that are, but I'm not sure if anyone is like watching over these stations 24 hours. Don't get any ideas, committee members, to go stuff the ballot box at the library.
I've done voting
I guess that's just, I know we're not voting on a budget here, but at the same time, it is important that we get the right information from the general public, and how do we ensure that is the best practice moving forward. And I think, if we just haphazardly say, oh yeah, we hope everybody votes right, well, we can't really say that's a I don't feel like that's the right way to do it, but that's just my opinion.
Well, I think it is important to do as Danielle said, where we make it very clear, like, the choice of what this committee is bringing forth to the select board as our option is going to be ours, right? So I think that no matter which way the public goes, I think that ultimately it's going to be our decision on how we present that to the select board and how we bring it forth. I do think it's important to say which way the public went. But like, if it comes out to be, 48 to 52, but like all of us really like that 48 design. Like, I think it's on us to be like, yeah, but like we're almost split, but we really like this one. We think it's more versatile. We think it's gonna be better in the long run. Then I think it's fair for us to say that and to go forward with that. And that we state very clearly in this poll to the public that like this is going to help inform the branding Belchertown committee in making their final decision, but it's not the final decision.
I think it would,
I
have,
agree with
it would
that.
have to be noted that way, otherwise.
And yeah, I mean, I would totally put that in the instructions of the form, have that text available so that it's, clear as day that this is not, the public isn't picking this, the committee is picking this, but we want everybody's input. We want people's opinions on it.
And that's what I kind of noted earlier. And I think, Maud, we were unsure if what is going to happen next, right? Is what Chris said and then kind of what I said, or Maud, are we taking the results as, final and that's what gets presented to the select board? I think that's the decision here.
I mean, it took us a long time to get people to fill out the survey. It was open for what, a month, and we were just like struggling. I feel like people will be more likely to vote for this, but what if we only get 50 replies? That's not a meaningful sample to make a decision when all of us have been involved in this for months and months and have all the background and all the thinking. Like, we just can't give too much weight to the vote, especially if it's not a lot of people.
Absolutely.
How are you going to distribute this?
So it's going to go on the website. So part one is the website with, we'll put alert or some sort of banner or something on the front page so that anybody who goes there will know to go to this page and put a vote in. We will have the social media campaigns driving to it. Hopefully we can get, all the different town organizations to spread the word, have, the BCC and the library and everybody else, also share out what the town message is. So that's sort of option one, is that digital platform push, which we usually get a good amount of responses from. The other one is going to be some sort of physical copies of a ballot box or something else. Maybe we do another one of those boards with the stickers. That seemed to be really easy, but we won't get any of the secondary questions. And that would be presented in the library, the senior center, and I think it was town hall was the third one.
And at the mailbox at the back door?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
I don't know if it's the mailbox at the back door, because that we'd have to check with Terry on.
I don't think Terry would have a problem with that, because there's already all sorts of stuff going in that box. There's going to be your tax bills. There's all sorts of stuff. So every time they empty that box, they are having to sort that out. It would just be one more pile that they are collecting in a box or in a mail slot somewhere.
Are you suggesting that they actually put it into the mailbox in the back, or that?
Yeah,
have a separate...
I absolutely am.
That would just mean that we would have to make sure that we got that mail out.
Well, that gets collected 3, 4, 5 times a day. Gotcha. So, I mean, and as I said, every time they go through that, they're already making multiple distributions depending on which, office in the building gets whatever it is, whether it's checks for the tax collector or whatever. So just having one more distribution for a week or so is going to be a big deal. Or in this case, 2 or 3 days.
How would we have ballots attached to that mailbox for people to fill out? Would we have to just like hang a notepad or something, or
maybe, or maybe as part of the electronic distribution, you just have a PDF file that they can print off and drop off at the library, at the town hall, at the senior center, wherever. And then at one point, when it's all said and done, somebody's just going to have to go around to all the collection points and put them all together in one pile.
Gotcha. I don't hate the idea of the
Ed,
PDF vote.
would you know if there's any, from a, public vote standpoint, that whether we have any guidelines that we have to follow with regards to any of this?
Well, in terms of what?
Just
I mean, you're going to put on here that basically
the rules
you're
of
gonna,
the equation.
yeah. I mean, this is like an informal poll. It's just,
okay.
The results from this poll are going to be guidance to the committee. It's not a binding, it's not a binding vote. It's just, it's going to give some guidance to this committee as we put forth our recommendations to the selectmen.
Right. Okay. Chris, you kind of said that earlier, but I just want to make sure that we're clear to, or however it's, written, that it's clear to that general public that this is a non-binding poll, or however you word it, that it's clear that it's not the final straw.
Yeah, no, it's just going to be guidance for this committee as we make our decisions.
Okay. So have we cleared that up? Is there anything else that we need to ratify at this point with respect to a vote?
Okay. I don't think so. I just want to add that we'll be meeting again next Wednesday. And then we have our special meeting the following Monday. We don't have a meeting on the books for that Wednesday of that week. I'm not sure if we need one. It would be after the select board vote. I don't know if we want to have one on the calendar just in case. Otherwise, we can have a pause and just have one meeting that week and then resume the following Wednesday.
Okay, so what happens if the select board abstains from voting on that day?
That's on them.
Yeah, no, but I mean, if they don't vote, then how does that change our timeline or whatever?
Well, then it means that the signage project that is supposed to be done by the end of June, when Maud's contract ends and when Stantec's contract ends, will not be done.
Okay. All right. I didn't know how that affected what we're doing. I understand the sign project, but for our timeline and what we have to do, if they say we're going to wait to vote, well, then what happens? Because we haven't had that conversation.
I think the expectation is that they will vote. If they have feedback that this needs to be edited in some way, then we would have to bring that to Katie and see if it's possible to do another round of edits. It might mean reducing some of the back end work that is on her end. It might mean removing some items from the scope to do another round of revision.
Yeah, I guess if you're talking about having a meeting the following Wednesday, I'm not sure there's enough time to cancel it after the select board meeting.
Oh, you can cancel at any time.
Yeah, you can cancel an hour ahead.
You can,
you
can cancel on the spot.
All right, I thought there was 48 hours or something like that.
Nope.
Okay.
And you can, you don't have to, but I mean, if things are going to be that tight, maybe you want to meet on Tuesday. The very next morning, you want to meet to give everybody as much time to revise if necessary.
Yeah, that's okay.
I mean, I think the other option is that some of the committee members, not quorum, will be at the select board meeting. I will be at the select board meeting. Katie will be at the select board meeting. That this committee just entrusts that if there is a recommendation, or I would argue and hope that the select board would vote to approve or vote to approve with certain changes made so that we don't have to go through the voting process again.
Sure.
So they might say I would hope that we could do a vote to approve if we change the font size, or a vote to approve if this is right, contingent upon XYZ, so that we don't have to go through that process again. I'm not sure if that's possible or how they roll in that regard.
Well, I'm just looking, from a planning and contingency standpoint, just in case.
I would personally hope that with 2 members of the select board present in all of these meetings, that catching one more person to say yes would be
At this
easy
point,
enough.
nothing surprises me.
I know,
No.
but like let's hope we can get those like 2 members to convince one more and just get this through. You know, that doesn't seem that hard.
Well, yeah. So it's
So I was going to say, in the meantime, if we, in addition to the 2 we have here, as long as we keep Steve Williams in the loop and are, so basically that there's no surprises. Steve knows ahead of time. Steve's going to be able to give an awful lot of input as we get down to the wire here about how things are going to go, what's needed.
So I might ask that on next Wednesday's meeting, when we have our final versions that are going to go to the public, that we share those with all of the select board members and say, we encourage you to vote too. Like, these are our final decisions. These are the ones that we're most confident about, most excited about. And I hope that when we get to that point where we're putting things forward to the public, the feeling is that we really like both options, and it's not an options that we hate the least, right? I think like it's great that we're having that kind of feedback at this stage while things are preliminary, but my hope is that the final versions that are going forth to the public are ones that like truly the committee is excited about, believes in, is enthusiastic about, that the public will be enthusiastic about, and then it's a choice between 2 great options, right, that resonate. So
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I disagree that we should individually bring this to the attention of the selectmen. If you're going to do that, I think you need to bring it to the attention of the office or Steve. Let Steve do that.
Okay, so maybe that's
in as much as they're going to be the board that makes the final vote on this, we can't be bringing it to them early.
Right. No, I mean, just these are the final 2 options that are going to the public for a vote. We encourage you to vote as well. But I hear you add that maybe
that's
Steve to send that.
Why I'm saying that should all be done through Steve.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So are there any other updates to come before us? Are we all set there? Is there anything else to come before the committee? At this point, I'm just, in the essence of time, I want to move things along here. So, so at this point, I'd open it up to any public comment, any letters or anything to come before us today. Hearing none. We've already talked about the next meeting time, so we're all set on that. Chris, did we decide whether we didn't decide whether we're going to do the Wednesday after the select board meeting, right? We didn't discuss that.
Doesn't hurt to schedule it.
Yeah, I got a note here saying that we could do Wednesday or Tuesday. We could just easily make it Wednesday and just schedule it out.
Yeah, okay. That way we're
and if we don't need it, we don't need it.
No, we just need to make a note that we need to cancel it if we have to, because we're not having to make quorum that day if we're not going to do it. So,
yeah.
Okay. So at this point, I'd like to ask for a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Second.
Call a vote.
Ed Knight, aye.
Aye.
Chris Martin, aye.
And Nate Shattuck, aye. So well, thank you all. And I look forward to seeing some more stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.